Okay, guys, I think we're good to go.
Awesome, cool. Well, thanks to everyone everyone that happens to be tuned in, listening over to this Twitter Spaces. I've got myself, Paul Pui, CEO and co-founder of Edge, and Renee, president of Sello, here to talk about the integration and the launch of Sello inside of Edge, which should be live in the stores. Hopefully, kind of takes a little while for the App Store and the Google Play Store to go live. So hopefully end of today to some point in time tomorrow, people can then be able to buy, sell, and trade Sello all within Edge, and even use it for connecting to various dApps through Wallet Connect. Your favorite staking interfaces, borrowing and lending interfaces, and whatever the DeFi and dApp ecosystem has to offer. But what I wanted to cover, Renee, is maybe, Renee, you can give a quick introduction on yourself, as well as a quick overview about Sello. We'll go and deep dive into Sello and what kind of differentiates it about the different cryptocurrencies that may be deemed similar to it, but we'll go and deep dive into that later. First, happy to hear from you and hear a little bit of a brief introduction on yourself and background and what brought you to kind of helping found Sello.
Amazing. Yeah, thanks, Paul, for having me. And yeah, super excited for seeing Sello and Edge. So maybe, just some quick background on myself. I've been an entrepreneur for the last decade or so, working actually with Marek, who's also my co-founder here at Sello, and Seb, our third co-founder, for most of that. Marek and I started a company out of MIT that was helping small businesses better compete with sort of the big guys online. And that company we ended up selling to GoDaddy, and then helped take GoDaddy public in 2015. And when we went back to the drawing board, Ethereum had happened. And we're like, wow, this is really exciting. And a lot of what kind of appealed to us about starting our previous company, which was really empowering the small guy, we ended up seeing some of that same kind of energy in the Ethereum community, and with it, a technology that just felt really promising in terms of thinking about how to bring just better payments infrastructure, particularly to markets that have been traditionally underserved. And so our starting point for Sello was actually with an eye towards payments, peer-to-peer payments, cash transfers. And interestingly, some of the first applications and use cases that went live when the network launched almost 2 years ago were in that field. So, for example, Grameen Foundation did one of the first, if not the first, true, big cash relief program just using crypto and sending money directly to non-custodial wallets, and people being able to use, in this case, Sello dollars on Valora to then actually buy groceries or medicine in the Philippines. So that was really one of the use cases that in the beginning had got us excited to start Sello. And we first started by building a wallet on Ethereum, and then quickly realized that in order to actually power fast, seamless payments, and especially micropayments, we needed to make modifications to the core protocol. And this is kind of how we went further and further into the stack, and ultimately ended up deciding to fork Ethereum. And so Sello is a fully EVM compatible proof of stake protocol. You can think about it as, not just dissimilar from a Polygon, for example, in terms of being kind of a side chain to Ethereum, but with a particular focus on payments. So fast, blocks, less than 5 seconds, finality, less than a cent in transaction fees, and then a few features that are really helping, particularly with the peer-to-peer payments use case. So, for example, on Sello, you can use the native stablecoins to pay for gas. So if I'm Paul, if I want to send you, $5 Sello dollars, then it's really nice if I don't also need Sello to make that transaction, but I can just settle that gas in Sello dollars, which I already have. There's a bunch of other innovations, probably to builders, most notably the focus on mobile applications and supporting kind of applications on mobile devices through an ultralight client. But I think more recently, what's drawn a lot of people to Sello, especially with sort of the discussions in the broader space around the impact of cryptocurrency on climate. As those have been picking up, Sello was the first chain to be carbon neutral, even carbon negative. And even more than that, there's a big, even in the first white paper, if you kind of go back to the very beginnings, there was this kind of ambition to say, hey, any currency launched on Sello should be backed by tokenized natural assets so that the increased use of the platform actually leads to preservation of those precious natural assets in the world and bring communities and the use of currency more in sync with the health of those communities. So that's maybe in a nutshell, what motivated us to start Sello, and really what also I think now has become, some of the key differentiators.
Well, I really, really resonate with the aspect of payments. And I think you focused on that a lot when talking about like what motivated you guys to build Sello. For those that aren't as aware of the long background of Edge, we started off as Airbits, and that focus as well for us was on payments, having NFC and Bluetooth payments in the app, as well as a built-in merchant directory where people could find places to spend Bitcoin. Now, from the viewpoint of payments, I'm really curious as to what exactly did Sello need to do to solve what issues you saw in Ethereum. Obviously, there's a scalability piece, but what were some of the more specific changes done? Now, I see this piece about the stablecoins, and I think that is fascinating. The fact that you can go ahead and actually pay your fees using stablecoins, that's probably one of the biggest issues. And one of the very common support tickets that we get at Edge is someone receives a token and then they can't send it, not realizing that they need a different asset. Now, going back to the original question, so what were some of the changes that you guys did to the Sello protocol specifically to facilitate payments? And then I want to dive again a little bit further into how you're able to make it such that people can pay with a token instead of Sello itself in order for these fees. But yeah, if you can give me an overview of some of these changes made to the blockchain to support payments, love to hear about
Absolutely. Yeah, so basically the ability to have stablecoins whitelisted as gas currency is really, it sounds like a simple modification, but it does really, from a user experience, unlock massive value. And so that's a key factor if you look at the architecture of the blockchain itself. However, and anyone who's even spent like a hot minute in payments will appreciate or know this. Whatever happens on-chain is really only part of the story. If you really want to make a difference in payments infrastructure, you have to deeply think about the communities you're looking to serve and how you actually tying into those communities from an on and off ramps perspective. And so from the very early days, this is something that we've been very eager to support and build kind of community around. And so today you have in many countries around the world, you have teams, projects, companies that have built on and off ramps into Sello to allow people very easily to go from local currency to on-chain stablecoins, for example. And that enables not just payments use cases in terms of peer-to-peer payments, but it also really brings people into this new digital economy, whether that's, obviously everybody's talking about NFTs these days. I see Ari on here, I see Crate. But even simple things like, hey, someone wants to do work online in micro work and doesn't have a good way to get paid because, they don't have the, supported forms of payment. And so if you have the ability to, for example, take Kenya, have someone earn Sello dollars for doing work in an on-chain marketplace or online marketplace, and then seamlessly transfer those Sello dollars to M-Pesa, right? Then that's obviously a big enabler for actually making crypto useful in that local context. And so a big focus for the Sello Foundation, and I think generally for the Sello ecosystem founders that have joined us on our mission, has been to remove the barriers going from fiat to crypto. And longer term, obviously, our dream here is that we'll all just transact in crypto, and salaries will be paid just natively in stable coins, and taxes can be paid in stable coins. And until that's true, we do need to think about how this ties into the current infrastructure. And I think that's kind of often overlooked when people talk about, hey, we can just use crypto for payments. But as much as we talk about sort of the on-chain kind of features and functionality, that's at least a good half of sort of that equation.
So you talk about the stablecoins really being a key part of the platform. Would you call the stablecoins on Sello kind of first-class citizens as opposed to just any arbitrary token? Do they have a special place in the protocol above and beyond a token that anyone could create on the platform the way they could on Ethereum?
Yeah, and for anyone who's new to Sello, all this is governed through on-chain votes, right? So anyone who has Sello can participate in governance, and so whenever a new native stablecoin is introduced, that passes through Sello governance. And so just recently, the community launched cEUR for Brazil, and and again, obviously the launch of the token itself is just a tiny part of actually making it valuable. And so a lot of this was community members, organizations in Brazil rallying around use cases that would actually be useful in the local context, and supporting cEUR in that way. That then complements the usage of cEUR in, for example, Sello DeFi, applications like Mula, where basically any kind of new stablecoin will come to its full sort of utility the more widely it is adopted for the use cases that people want to use it for, whether that's earning yields or taking out loans or making a payment. So to fully answer your question, beyond those stablecoins being used for or also being able to kind of pay for gas, there's a tie-in into the protocol itself, and in terms of Sello, the native asset being used as a reserve asset. So some folks here may be familiar with Terra and the relationship between Terra UST and Luna, the native token for the protocol. Sello has a similar design, though the reserve is more diversified in terms of, in addition to the native token, in this case Sello, also having other assets, diversify that reserve and make it more resilient to, strong movements in the price of reserve assets. So these assets, right now are Bitcoin, ETH, DAI, and then we just started adding some of these natural assets that I kind of mentioned in the beginning. But over time, we really see that shift to be much more kind of mapping to real world assets. And whenever you tie, a reserve to real world assets, then, I think you have a much better chance of actually maintaining stability over time. And so this is kind of a big movement, and especially given that it ties to natural assets, it has sort of this additional benefit of, in a way, kind of the more adoption we see for Sello assets and the Sello platform more generally, the more we're able to preserve the planet.
So I'm curious about how these stable coins are effectively made stable. You kind of hinted at the fact that there was some backing of the assets with things like Bitcoin and ETH, I presume Sello itself. Most stable coins, for those that are listening, kind of fall into a couple buckets of architecture. One is that they are collateralized in the real world by the actual asset that's being represented. So Tether being an example, USDC being another example, where both of those are backed by dollars in a bank account. Probably some have criticized Tether by also being backed by US dollar debt as opposed to dollars themselves. In the case of cUSD and cEUR and cReal, how are those tokens effectively made stable? Like, what's the stability mechanism? Is it backed by actual dollars, euro, or real, or is it algorithmically backed by another currency such as Sello itself or other crypto assets?
Yeah, Paul, you're absolutely right. So that's the model. It's an algorithmic stablecoin, which is over collateralized. So I think a nice analogy here, if you go to the Ethereum world, different mechanics, but Maker, is a in a way like a stablecoin protocol on the Ethereum layer one protocol, right? And so you could think about the stablecoin protocol that powers the Sello stablecoins as a very similar, kind of protocol on top of the Celo layer one protocol. And then from a mechanics perspective, rather than having, individuals create sort of, like kind of locked ETH positions like it would was Maker, on Ethereum here, that's done programmatically by the protocol itself. And not just for Celo dollars, but across the whole range of available stablecoins. So currently, all Celo dollars, Celo euros, Celo real are backed by a shared reserve. Let me just kind of pull it up while we're chatting here, but I think it's about a 3x over collateralization or so. And just as you said, in Celo, in Bitcoin, ETH, and some of the other assets in that basket. And so if you think about where we are seeing most of the usage for these stablecoins, right, which is really in the real world, people using this for day-to-day payments. Some people are already getting paid in Celo dollars. I know a few companies that have started doing payroll in Celo dollars. And actually, I myself receive some of my payroll in Celo dollars. The stability here is really critical. So we've prioritized stability above everything else, including capital efficiency. But I think that's really the right approach if you want to actually have this be used in the real world versus more, I think there's a bunch of interesting experiments that we've seen around algorithmic stablecoins where stability was maybe not the top sort of thing that was kind of being optimized for. And that's all good because I think experimentation moves the whole space forward. But in our case, we wanted to, from the outset, design something that will really hold up, especially through kind of major swings in the market.
Now, you had mentioned that some of these stablecoins like cUSD, cEUR are actually backed by Bitcoin. Now, is that Bitcoin that's being held in a kind of like a wrapped Bitcoin, which is held custodially, or is that a tokenized Bitcoin that's been somehow transferred over onto the Sello blockchain from the Bitcoin blockchain using some type of a bridge? How is that Bitcoin effectively backing Sello stablecoins?
Totally, yeah. This is probably one of the most exciting areas, right? I mean, with sort of the rise of cross-chain decentralized bridging infrastructure, it's actually possible to have these assets be kind of basically managed on chain. That's not the case today. Today, that's kind of through an arm's length kind of asset manager. That's kind of in a way like executing the protocol kind of rebalancing kind of decisions. But longer term, and I think we're moving much faster to this than originally anticipated when starting this, just given how quickly bridging and infrastructure has kind of come live and has grown in usage and is maturing. So yeah, long term, all this is kind of, you can basically imagine any asset on any chain as part of the reserve, assuming it has kind of sufficient liquidity to enable the reserve to trade in and out of it.
Got it. So right now, the representation of Bitcoin and ETH on Sello is using kind of like a wrapped Bitcoin model that is held by a custodian and then minted onto the chain. But the stablecoins themselves are protocol based. Does that sound correct? Like the fact that you then take those Bitcoin and ETH based tokens and use those to over collateralize these stablecoins. Would that be an accurate representation of how the system works today?
Yeah, it's a bit of a hybrid approach. So if you anyone here interested to dive deeper into this, if you go to celloreserve.org, you have kind of the full breakdown and sort of the addresses to, any point in time, 24/7 to track the the status of like the collateralization of the reserve and the stablecoins outstanding in real time. Which also, you brought up Tether earlier, right? I mean, the big question I think ever since I got into this space is like, what are the Tether, reserves, and like, has anyone like seen like a report? And here, we really have this kind of obviously instant 24/7, always available data, which I think is really the power, truly leveraging the power of blockchain. Now, with sort of assets and sort of thinking about the asset portfolio over time, I won't speak too much for the team that's kind of working on that and driving that. But if you look, for example, at the proposal that was put forward to bring more natural assets into the reserve, and a big a big goal there kind of is to move to 40% of the Sello reserve to be in natural assets. And this is if you look at the Climate Collective, which is a group of leading climate crypto projects that are kind of driving this effort. It's very compelling, because if you even at sort of the kind of at the levels of the reserve over the past few months, that would result, if that were kind of true, and for that to happen, you need to have these assets kind of on chain to be traded into the reserve and have sufficient liquidity and so on. But if that were to happen, we would, have quite a meaningful contribution towards global climate goals. I think the exact amount there, let me just kind of bring this up, and I can maybe, I don't know if I can do this while on my phone here dialed in, share the link somewhere for anyone interested. But if not, I'll just follow up with a tweet about it for anyone interested. But that's really, I think this is kind of one of the most ambitious undertakings around climate in crypto, point stop. And like I have kind of regular chats with the team at the Climate Collective, and they're just doing magnificent work. So would also encourage anyone who is interested at the intersection of climate and crypto to consider taking a look at them and connecting with their team.
Okay, with respect to climate, this is an interesting topic, and obviously we're heavily debated. Bitcoin's come under heavy criticism for possibly being, climate unfriendly and not the most green of currencies, although that is a very heavily debated topic. Other than the fact, so I understand Sello being proof of stake. So obviously being proof of stake means that there is no expending of energy explicitly to validate transactions, right? Just clarification for those of you listening on the call right now, proof of work is what Bitcoin and many similar currencies use. Currently, Ethereum is using proof of work. That's where energy is expended through computational power to prove that you've put in money. You've basically put in some amount of money in the form of energy, such that when you validate a transaction, you're saying, hey, I've put in X amount of money into verifying that these transactions are valid. Proof of stake kind of takes a similar approach in the sense that you're putting up money, but that money isn't in the form of energy. It's in the form of the actual token of the blockchain, or potentially other tokens if it would allow you to do so. And by doing that, you're not expending explicit energy. Instead, you're putting money up for loss, meaning that if you verify a transaction that is not valid, you would lose some of that money, as opposed to losing all that energy you had already spent. Now, proof of stake is generally considered to be more green friendly. Where does Sello go above and beyond that from the viewpoint of being proof of stake? So proof of stake being green friendly in and of itself, are there other aspects of Sello that are more climate friendly in and of themselves above and beyond just proof of stake?
Yeah, absolutely. So from the launch of the protocol, out of the inflation, kind of protocol inflation, the protocol is programmatically kind of offsetting the carbon footprint even of just kind of the proof of stake infrastructure. But I do think the much bigger point really is around bringing natural assets on chain and locking them in the reserve that's underpinning Sello currencies. And I think that all things kind of start small, but kind of just seeing the growth even over the past year and what's ahead in terms of like usage, right? Sello just crossed 100 million transactions on chain, right? And so as more and more applications launch, as more and more people use applications built on Celo. We just at the end of last year, Kickstarter announced that they're decentralizing and they picked Celo, and the climate kind of strategy for Sello and sort of the approach was a big driver of their decision to do so, right? So I think generally as adoption of the chain also picks up, right, they're kind of just these built-in scaling effects, right, that will kind of more than sort of just the linear offsets for the proof of stake. Will have massive impact on climate. So that's personally what I'm kind of most excited about. And I think we're even seeing this with DeFi for the People, which is sort of our campaign to really bring together all the leading DeFi projects, both kind of native to Sello and some in other communities that really care about actually not just servicing the 1%, but actually really making DeFi accessible to people in the real world, where I think, that kind of consciousness is, I think, in every discussion that I'm having, is always a big factor. So I think, to me, I think this is kind of, it comes to the point where that's something that's very core to our DNA and has always been, versus sort of kind of an afterthought, buying offsets, which I think it's kind of it's a tiny fraction of what everybody should already be doing. But I think there's so much more we can leverage token economics and crypto for.
So with respect to DeFi, I definitely want to go into what's on the roadmap as far as incorporation of DeFi protocols into Sello. Before I do that, I want to let people know if anyone has a question, feel free to go ahead and kind of raise the hand. We'll get the hosts to let people chime in with a question or two while we go forward with some other questions regarding DeFi. So with respect to the DeFi protocols, I'm a big fan of DeFi. I've been promoting it for years now. I think it's the next thing that we need on top of just sound money and then payments. What are the most popular DeFi protocols so far that people are using on Sello? Because obviously the more adoption we get for Sello, given Sello's initiative and reducing carbon footprint, that helps the entire planet as a whole. But what are some of the most popular used DeFi protocols today on Sello? And then what do you think is in store for the rest of 2022 as far as bringing in more DeFi functionality, more protocols, whether they've already existed on ETH or Polygon, Matic, and bringing those into Sello or that are Sello native?
Absolutely, yeah. And look, I think you need kind of every ecosystem needs kind of a basic infrastructure, right, around supporting basic use cases like, trading different tokens, right? So sort of your AMMs, to lending, to yield. And I think, all of those primitives are kind of well established. And I think where I see the Sello ecosystem really push the boundaries is thinking about how to bring these primitives to a user on a mobile phone. User, it's like making up a new kind of term here. So I think there was a stat out there that Uniswap had put out at the end of last year, where I think over 80% of their users were actually accessing Uniswap from a mobile device, right? And those kind of numbers are unheard of in the Ethereum ecosystem, because that's it's just not the predominant kind of user for Ethereum DeFi, given fees and just sort of the tooling. Now, I think where I generally think we are. Sorry, there's a plane. Plane going over. Where I'm kind of personally most excited is when we think about kind of habits or things that kind of really actually make a difference to someone in the real world. So one area that we've been very passionate about is under collateralized or uncollateralized lending. And so from the very early days of Sello, the the lightweight identity protocol that is used to map phone numbers to wallets to just dramatically improve usability by me being able to send any phone number in the world funds even before they have a wallet address on Sello. you can think about that as an anchor also to an on-chain reputation, and leveraging that for lending, I think, is something that a few teams in the ecosystem have gotten really excited about and are building against. I saw Marco earlier here, who's the CEO founder of Impact Market, which is a peer-to-peer UBI protocol, and has, within just a few months, scaled to, millions of dollars being dispersed to, I think, close to 30,000 people. And a lot of these daily payments are micropayments, and, really wouldn't be possible with Ethereum, or, forget about kind of, traditional financial tools and wallets, just from a transaction cost
payments
perspective.
are actual loans, like under collateralized loans.
They're payments. They're payments. Yeah. So they're based on
under-collateralized loans.
Donations. Yeah, but there are pilots underway around under-collateralized loans as well. So it's all happening. I think it's exciting because I think sometimes when you kind of look at coverage of DeFi, right, you feel like, oh, maybe this is the top, like we've already seen everything, and like, where's the innovation going to come from? But I think the innovation of the next few years is going to be just magnificent, and it's going to be tied much more to real world use cases. And so we're, I personally think we're kind of at like the 1-3% progress bar in terms of where we're going to go in the space. And so to me, that's probably like, if there are teams interested in that or working on that, I'd be super interested in chatting with them, because I feel like that's really what's most needed now, is bringing some of that innovation to communities that lack access to loans, lack access to yield, lack access to kind of just a way of building wealth and making payments.
Okay, guys, sorry to interrupt. I see that Patrick raised his hand to speak, so I'm going to let him ask his question now, and then right after him we have Bankless Africa who'd like to speak as well. So let me pull in Patrick. Okay, Patrick, you can ask your question. Patrick?
You're just muted, Patrick, if you want to unmute yourself.
Okay, we'll let Bankless Africa go because I've seen their account waiting for some time, so.
Maybe some music, guys. Hello.
There we go, Patrick now.
Hello, everybody. I'm from Poland. I am the Logic. If you want to talk with me, just text, and that's it. Free Ukraina. Free Ukraine.
Okay, sorry about that, guys. I've brought in Bankless Africa now, so you're welcome to speak as well.
Hey, Sello, what's up? What's up? Great discussions, by the way. And so my question sort of pertains to DeFi for the people, which I think is a great initiative, especially for the African folks. Have you come across, Rene, have you come across any regulatory roadblocks that has been hard in pushing the initiative that you might be currently be dealing with? How is development in terms of blockchain stuff or Web3 stuff on the African continent going? What are some of the challenges that you are facing?
Yeah, thank you. These are awesome questions. So let's start with regulation. Look, I think we're in a really great spot. And whenever we have conversations with regulators or governance, they're always surprised by like the positive impact, that this technology can have, and actually having kind of real data and usage to support it. And so we're always happy to engage and just share some of the work we're doing. And I think this public notion of like regulators, always kind of being against and kind of negative is, I think it's not really what we're seeing in meetings where people are leaning in, they're engaged, they want to learn, they want to actually see what this technology can do. And I think if you point to many of sort of the examples of DeFi on Celo, right? Like it's actually it's very positive. And again, we're early, but I think that's we see ourselves also in a way like providing public service and educating anyone who wants to listen about what this technology can do to kind of help. A lot of our community is across the African continent, and some of the team was just in Nairobi for like a big conference, and we're having events and meetups in different markets. So yeah, I think what is exciting about Web3 broadly, and then I think with Sello, what we've been seeing is that when you have an open protocol and kind of a community where really people are invited to contribute and build on or with Sello, no matter where they are, it's actually leading to better outcomes, to better products. Because, if you have someone who's building, whether that's, I mentioned M-Pesa earlier, whether that's in Nairobi or in Manila to build for the Philippines, right? Like the local knowledge of understanding the community, but then plugged into this global community of other builders who are solving similar issues. That's really, that's a really powerful combination. And we're actually, we're getting the whole community together in Barcelona in the first week of April. There's a big conference, Sello Connect. It's going to be a full house. And I was just going with our teams through all the submissions for talks, and it's going to be hard to actually fit them all into 2 days. But there's going to be also a bunch of events and meetups around the conference that I'm excited for. And to me, that's always, these are the highlights, because you have builders really coming together from all over the world, and they're all building towards a shared mission. And to me, that's more than anything, that's kind of the magic of blockchain. And now that I'm thinking about it, combining your two questions, maybe we should also invite a few regulators to come see that magic.
Yeah, I mean, it's awesome. My last question before I step into the listeners, but I think Paul wanted to say something before my last question, probably.
No, go ahead. Finish up with your question.
Yeah, cool. So, I mean, we know that Africa is a continent of culture with a lot of vibes. So I'm assuming you are not an African from the conversation so far and trying to place the accent. And I know, I mean, working on the continent, you by all means have come across like the culture. So how do you see the cultural clash? And we know crypto has been largely Western culture driven, and so trying to like push this technology in Africa, and sort of like clashing with the culture. What are some of the experiences that you have had culturally that are sort of influenced the work that you are doing on the continent, whether on the positive side or the negative side? I'm interested to actually know about that.
I've not experienced any culture clash, to be honest. And I talk to founders all over, but especially in Africa, where we have quite a big, kind of contingent of our community frequently. So, yeah, I think, I mean, if you're interested, I'd love to connect you. I give you a list of 10 or more if you want, founders who are building interesting things in Africa on Sello. And I think the thing that I think really unites people here is kind of a shared mission, right? To serve our communities, whether that's around access to a digital economy, to some of these climate goals, which really I think are these are kind of global in nature. And so I'd love to kind of follow up, because I think we got to do more to kind of make voices, especially in global communities, heard. And I would love to invite you to Barcelona to come meet some of the founders and our community broadly. And if you're interested, let me know, and we can set that up.
Well, the great thing, we got everyone's handle here on Twitter. So definitely reach out to Renee. Renee, feel free to reach out to Bankless Africa and see if you can connect, better understand the ecosystem.
Beautiful.
All right.
My DMs are open.
All right. I'll reach out. Thank you.
My quick comment to you, Bankless, is in our experience and having dealt with some African user base, is it was less of a culture differential, but in some ways a technology differential, which, you know, implies some culture. You know, Africa pretty much kind of leapfrogged some Western countries in respect to technology going straight to mobile, you know, kind of skipping landlines. And to some degree, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not from Africa, so I don't know the boots on the ground, but jumping straight to mobile and sometimes even bypassing like desktop type interfaces. I'm assuming mobile is very predominant there, and making sure that the interface that people use is mobile friendly. I know that there were some early startups in the Bitcoin space that even tried to not bypass, but were also held up by trying to make their products feature phone friendly, not smartphone, but feature phone friendly, allowing people to just use basic text messages to send and receive crypto. That's one thing that I'm actually really excited about Sello for. While it's not enabling just text messages, it is enabling that wallet address to be tied to a phone number. And I really wish I had a bit more time. We're kind of way over on time for our spaces. We're about 10 minutes over now. But I invite anyone who's listening on this call that isn't aware of a specific feature in Sello such that it can register a user's address tied to their phone number, and do that in a way that doesn't require, correct me if I'm wrong, Renee, doesn't require a single centralized authority to validate that phone number, but instead nodes doing that. That brings about more of that Venmo experience, which may relate to, I think, the vast majority of the world, not just Africa. But overall, definitely look into some of those additional features in Sello, especially the phone number validation, tying to an account. And I'm excited about what kind of the future has in store. And once again, we're a bit over on time. For anyone that is interested in interacting with Sello, there are many different apps, exchanges, as Renee had mentioned. They're focused above and beyond just the protocol, but also getting people to easily on-ramp onto Sello. You can use it in Edge. Hopefully, it's been developed, it's pushed out. We're just waiting for the app stores to approve it. Should be able to get it on Edge, on iOS and Android, and be able to connect to various dApps, DeFi protocols using the Wallet Connect protocol, which has been built into Edge over the past couple months. You'll be able to use that with Sello as well. So Renee, just to kind of close things off, where can people find out some additional information about Sello, whether it be following yourself or the project as a whole?
Yeah, absolutely. And really, Paul, thanks again for having me. Super excited for this collaboration. I think this was a really great session. And yeah, excited to also spend more time with people in your community. And yeah, look, about Sello. So Sello.org is the website. I mentioned Barcelona Blockchain Week. Sello Connect is April 4 to 5th. So if that's kind of an easy place for you to go to, I would definitely encourage you to come, because that's going to be really awesome. Twitter is always a good place to find sort of like, the latest big kind of updates. Chat.cello.org is our Discord. There's obviously various Telegram groups and the likes, but I think for anyone here who's a founder, feel free to reach out, DM, or connect with another founder in the ecosystem. I think I always feel like these are the most valuable ways to kind of learn more from a fellow founder. And then anyone who's interested in some of the projects or products kind of on top of Sello and accessible through Wallet Connect through Edge. There are a bunch of places to learn more about those, including Sello Hub, which is a community-run website. But yeah, exciting to kind of do this session, and looking forward to meeting many new people here and through Edge.
Cool. And Sello Camp is still going on as well, right? That's a recurring accelerator for people building applications, dApps, products on the Sello blockchain. Correct me if I'm wrong. That's still kind of a rolling rolling.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was just chatting with Alon, the founder of Sello Camp, this morning, and yeah, they're seeing kind of a record number of applicants, and like he's been really excited about the projects. Lots of interesting things kind of coming up in NFTs, even some kind of games now coming to Sello, and just a whole bunch of really strong mission-aligned projects, which is really exciting.
Awesome. Cool. So once again, Sello.org in case you're looking for information on Sello itself. Renee, your Twitter account, follow Renee, correct? So feel free to follow him.
I made it easy.
Yep. I'm at Pollinator with 2 L's. And of course, if you need any information on Edge or links to download it in the App Store, just go to edge.app. Simple as that, edge.app. And that'll get you to all the different locations where you can download Edge, and also follow us on various social media channels. So with that, we're way over time. Had a great conversation. There's always so much we could chat about. We could have gone for another hour or so with all the different functionality in Sello. But we'll end it at that. Hopefully we'll do this again. When there's some new announcements with respect to the Sello ecosystem, and hopefully with some and doing other spaces in the future. Renee, thanks so much for your time. Everyone else who chimed in, thanks so much for all the time as well. This is being recorded, so we'll try to push it out on some other social media channels for you guys to review. And take care, everyone. Have a great rest of your Tuesday.
Thanks, you, everyone.
All. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.